In the many explorations into reportedly haunted locations we've delved into together, we've found ourselves in many unique corners of the United States. We've explored bookstores, infamous homesteads, theaters, asylums, and even a zoo. But with every pit stop on our paranormal road trip, we've always had the option of making a quick exit if things got too scary. But what if there is no escape? What if you are entirely surrounded, and not just by a location's bloody and storied history and supposed spirits, but quite literally surrounded on all sides by water? Hey kids, welcome home. For tonight's long overdue journey, we will need not only to hit the road, but the boat as well, as we explore the tragic history of Mackinac Island. From brutal battles of war to scorned lovers, Mackinac Island certainly has a reputation. So join us as we cross the waters of Lake Huron and Lake Michigan and explore the haunts of Mackinac. Mackinac Island was formed over 12,000 years ago, with the last glaciers melting into the Straits of Mackinac. These glaciers cut the Earth's surface, depositing salt water to form the Great Lakes. During the following 10,000 years, the lake levels would dramatically crest and fall, carving out the cliffs and limestone formations that would become Mackinac Island. The indigenous people of the area would spend their summers on the island, and for centuries the land would be claimed as sacred ground by the Anishinaabe people, which is made up of the Ottawa, Ojibwa, and Potawatomi tribes. According to the Mackinac Island tourism webpage, Mackinac Island served as sacred burial grounds, as well as a place of gathering for fishing, trapping, and navigating the northern waterways. Even the name Mackinac Island is derived from the original Native American name interpreted by the French as Michilimackinac, meaning place of the great turtle. In 1670, Claude de Blanc and Jacques Marquette, French missionaries, would bring the first permanent European settlement in Michigan and what would come to be known as Sault Ste. Marie and nearby St. Ignace. The pair would also establish a Catholic mission on Mackinac Island, the Missionary Bank Chapel, which has since been reconstructed in Marquette Park, fittingly named after the mission's founder. By the early quarter of the 18th century, the Straits of Mackinac connecting Lake Huron and Lake Michigan would become the center of the predominant fur trade, as the straits had become the primary transportation corridor for the upper Great Lakes. In an effort to safeguard their role in the fur trade, the French opted in 1715 to build a fort, Fort Michilimackinac, on the mainland, now referred to as the Lower Peninsula, and what would come to be known as Mackinac City. Michilimackinac remained a French outpost until 1760, when British victories in the 7 Years' War transformed New France into British Canada. British soldiers and fur traders would then make their way to the Straits of Mackinac the following year. During the American Revolution, 20 years later, Michilimackinac would be dismantled by the British, who moved the entire camp to Mackinac Island on the orders of Lieutenant Governor Patrick Sinclair. He believed that the cliffs of Mackinac Island would provide better defenses. The civilian community would establish their village in the Bay Area below, as to exclude themselves from the fort areas. Mackinac Island became a part of the new United States in 1783. However, the British maintained control of the region for an additional 13 years. It would be on September 1st in 1796 that the first American troops would march into Fort Mackinac and claim it as their own. In an effort to maintain a presence, the British would move just 40 miles east to nearby St. Joseph's Island, just inside of the Canadian waters, building their own fort. War would break out between Great Britain and the United States yet again with the War of 1812. Word of the conflict would reach the British on Fort St. Joseph, and on the night of July 16th, Captain Charles Roberts sailed from Fort St. Joseph, accompanied by 40 British soldiers and 500 French, Canadian, and Native American allies. They would land on the north shore of Mackinac Island under the cover of darkness and drag their cannon to the high ground located at the back of the fort. They would then take position within the surrounding woods and wait for their opportunity to strike. American soldiers had been unaware of the hostilities that had surfaced and found themselves at a disadvantage as they had not been anticipating this invasion by the British. Despite the best efforts of Lieutenant Commander Porter Hanks to assemble his troops, the American soldiers soon realized that they were grossly outnumbered and that they were no match for the British and for their cannon. And this first battle of the War of 1812 would end quite quickly, with Lieutenant Hanks surrendering without resistance to the British, as he was afraid for the safety of the civilian residents of the island. The war would continue to rage on, and the Americans continued to strategize on how they could once again overtake Mackinac. And they would seize an opportunity 2 years later, landing on the northern side of the island. British Lieutenant Colonel Robert McDougall, as an answer to the invasion, would march his own troops from the fort and positioned his Native American allies with the orders to ambush the invaders. A bloody battle would ensue, and when the gunpowder and cannon fire cleared, 13 Americans would be dead, including Lieutenant Hanks' second-in-command, Major Andrew Holmes. The war would be declared officially over by December of 1814 with the signing of the Treaty of Ghent. The treaty succeeded where the Americans' battles with the British had failed, as the lands of the Upper Great Lakes returned to U.S. ownership, and peace was returned to Mackinac Island, and the focus of the people could return to the fur trade. And now, without the fear of battles, prominent businessman John Jacob Astor would locate his northern headquarters of the American Fur Company on Mackinac Island. Millions of dollars worth of furs would be traded through Mackinac Island in the 1820s, and the island would be a hub of activity, with many voyagers, merchants, and natives gathering to purchase supplies, sell their wares, and enjoy the beauty and tranquility of the island. The peace would also extend to the many indigenous families that would make their home amongst the Americans on the island, ending the bitter rivalry that had been propagated by the British. In 1823, a Protestant mission would be established by Reverend William Ferry, and by the 1830s, the Presbyterians on the island would build the mission church. The island community continued to shape itself over the next decade, and Michigan would gain statehood in 1837, at which point the island's population and prosperity was slowing, and by the end of the 1930s, the fur trade would begin to see a drastic decline, shifting the primary industry to fishing. However, following the Civil War, a spike in tourism would see new life brought to the island. Visitors would be delighted by the historic charm and the natural beauty of Mackinac Island. And in answer to this newfound popularity, the government created the Mackinac National Park in 1875, making it the second national park ever to be established, just 3 years after Yellowstone. Fort Mackinac's commandant would be named as the park superintendent, and a second company of soldiers would be enlisted to join the garrison and to help with park maintenance. With the announcement of Mackinac's National Park, tourism would see an even larger increase, which led to the establishment of several curio shops, restaurants, and hotels to entice a longer stay. The indigenous people, still maintaining residence on the island, would also join in the trade, with the Ottawa and Ojibwa tribeswomen making jewelry and dolls made of corn husks to sell to the travelers. In 1869, Henry Murdoch would open the island's first candy kitchen, which would offer sweet treats to the young children vacationing on the island, with delectable delights such as taffy, hand-dipped chocolates, and, if any of you are familiar with current-day Mackinac Island, this last treat will be of no surprise to you: fudge. By the 1920s, fudge became Mackinac Island's #1 most demanded treat, a reputation that continues today, as there are currently more than a dozen shops catering to the chocoholic needs of the many visitors to the island. I guess some things never change.
And now a word from our sponsors.
Are you authorized to be backstage?
No. Hey, where's VENATOS?
Are you allowed to be here?
Just tell me where VENATOS are.
I want to take a moment to thank this video sponsor, VENATOS. At this point, there isn't much I can say that you don't already know. VENATOS offers quality gaming equipment at an affordable price, and they stand by their work with customer support that is second to none. With free shipping to the US and Canada, VENATOS makes it easy to upgrade your setup without forfeiting quality. Go to VENATOS.com and make sure to use code PRESSSTARTMOM at checkout to secure your 10% discount. Thank you to VENATOS for sponsoring this video and for your unwavering support of the channel. Let's get back to the video. In 1887, the now infamous Grand Hotel would officially open its doors, which quickly established Mackinac Island as one of the most fashionable places to spend a summer holiday. After 115 years of service, in 1895, the United States Army would remove all of their soldiers from Fort Mackinac. The federal government would also transfer the fort and national park to the state's control, creating Michigan's first state park. In addition to this transfer, the Mackinac Island State Commission would be established to assist in overseeing and maintaining the park and conserving its historic relevance and ensuring the protection of its beautiful natural resources. Just 3 years after these changes, the first automobile would make an appearance on the island, the results of which would be far from favorable, as the vehicles were considered noisy, disrupting the quiet tranquility enjoyed by the islanders and its many visitors. It also took a toll on the thriving carriage tour business on the island, as the vehicle noises spooked the horses who were not used to such contraptions. The tour drivers would swiftly create a petition which was approved by the village council to ban motorized vehicles on the island. And while this rule was decades later amended to allow for emergency service vehicles to be motorized for the general public, that being island residents and tourists alike, this no motorized vehicle rule still very much applies today, with the modes of transportation being reserved to walking, biking, or horse-drawn carriage. The Moral Rearmament, which was an international peace organization originally established in England in 1938 by Frank Bauman, a former Lutheran pastor from Pennsylvania, began gaining in popularity. The MRA would hold its first conference on Mackinac Island in 1942. They held conferences at both the Grand Hotel and also leased the vacant Island House Hotel for Mackinac Island State Park. The conferences increased in size, so that in 1954, MRA decided to purchase land on the island for their own center. In 1955, a conference center for the MRA would be constructed on Mackinac Island. Over the next 10 years, the Moral Rearmament would construct 9 structures in 5 separate building phases. The first building to be completed was the 800-seat theater. MRA used song and drama to present its message and produced its own plays. The theater was designed by architect William Willett of Los Angeles. In 1959, the Mackinac Island State Park Commission would assist in a restoration of Fort Mackinac, and today, the Commission's family of historic sites and museums also includes the Mill Creek Discovery Park, the Mackinac Point Lighthouse in Mackinac City, and the Richard and Jane Manugan Art Museum. By 1964, the MRA camp on Mackinac Island stood largely unused. Not wanting to see the space going to waste, Moral Rearmament member and journalist Peter Howard would propose the idea of converting the deserted camp into a college campus. His proposal was to create a high-level school institution to educate young adults for the 21st century to play key roles in international relations, modern languages, theater, television, radio, journalism, art, government, and public affairs. The college planned to offer professional degrees in all of those fields. The school was granted a charter from the state of Michigan in 1965. The MRA deeded its headquarters on the island and the old mission house to Mackinac College. The first class was admitted in 1966, due to graduate in 1970. It consisted of 113 students from 30 states and also Canada. The charter class of freshman students were put in temporary classroom facilities on September 15th in the new Peter Howard Memorial Library, building on the beach at Cedar Point until the college facilities were finished. The school closed at the end of June in 1970, 4 years after opening, having only had one graduating class. The American School Board Journal cited the reasons for the closure as being all too familiar. The the high cost of setting up the campus and programs, a smaller enrollment than planned, and a lack of alumni to fund endowments. Clearly, the history of this 8-mile island is extensive, and in addition to a broad history, the island also has numerous reports of hauntings. Of course, otherwise, why would we be here? With the rich and extensive history of Mackinac Island, there is on the surface a lot to be discovered when vacationing to the island in modern day. However, underneath the beautiful landscape and bustling tourism, there are several stories from all areas of the island that recall numerous, far different tales, recalling its violent and tragic history, tales of fallen soldiers, lost loves, and a cursed film set. With Mackinac Island essentially being a large retired battleground, many residents and visitors recount tales that would lead one to believe that the soldiers buried on Mackinac Island are not quite resting in peace. And how could they? Back when the indigenous people accounted for the majority of the island's population, many would want their loved ones buried on the island, and with little regard to overpopulation, the rule of thumb was, if you could dig deep enough, you could claim the plot of land. Due to this lack of regulation, bones are overturned on the island, even to this day. Thanks so much for watching part 1 of this special edition of Haunted United States, digging into Mackinac Island. It was originally going to be one video, but there is so much to talk about here that this is going to have to be a several-part series. So, buckle yourselves in, kids. This is going to be one long road trip. Thanks again to VENATOS for their continued support of the channel, and of course our patrons and members, especially Stop Propaganda, a true channel OG. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, but for now, it's time to pull into the rest area and take a break. Until next time.